Hello and welcome to Searching for Service, brought to you by Rotary District 5950. I'm your host, Kelly Kirk.
And I'm Joe Kirk.
And I'm Chad Larson.
Before we dive into who our guest is today, Joe's going to remind us of our show's purpose.
Our show's purpose is to expose people seeking service to people that are doing service. And today we have Al, and I cannot wait to hear about what he's got going on.
Yeah, so our guest today is Al Krysan. He is the Partner Relations and Engagement Director for Amplify Mission Network. We're excited to have him. Let's go ahead and dive in. I'm your host, Kelly Kirk.
I'm Joe Kirk.
And I'm Chad Larson. We'll be back.
Hello and welcome back to Searching for Service, brought to you by Rotary District 5950. I'm your host, Kelly Kirk.
I'm Joe Kirk.
And I'm Chad Larson.
And before we get started with our guest, Chad is going to remind us of our show sponsorship.
We want to thank the Russell Hampton companies for sponsoring the show, the #1 printer in the world for Rotary licensed gear. If you're watching online, you can see some of the stuff they sent us. They can print anything from your swag, your badges, your awards. We even got a cutting board here, or anything you need for printing, and whether it's for Rotary gear or printing in your other personal or business life. Check out russellhampton.com.
And any orders that you have, 10% goes back into Rotary, at least for Rotary
For
gear.
Rotarians, yeah.
And that's huge, right?
Yeah.
Sure is.
Great partnership.
Well, we want to welcome our guest today, Al Krysan. Welcome. How are you?
I'm doing awesome. Thanks for having me.
Good. You excited?
I am. I'm ready.
Good.
Let's do it.
I am certainly thrilled to have you on here and just speak to Amplify. And so we really want to take this
Amplify Mission Network.
Amplify Mission Network. We want to take this opportunity for our listeners to get to know you a little bit better. And so I always like to ask the simplest of simple questions. Where are you from?
Born in St. Cloud, Minnesota,
Okay.
but raised in a little town of Cresco, Iowa, right on the Minnesota border.
Cresco, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm sure you got a lot like the Cresco, like. Am I thinking?
Crisco?
Crisco?
I'm thinking
You're thinking
Crisco.
Crisco. Yeah.
Whoops.
The closer
Yeah.
to the South Dakota side or the Wisconsin side?
We are 50 miles straight south of Rochester, Minnesota. Things of notary are Dr. Norman Borlaug. He was the Nobel Peace Prize winner, wrestled at the University of Minnesota, father of the Green Revolution. And then Featherlight Trailers. It's their corporate home is in Cresco. So
Oh, funny.
little farming community, 3,800 people. Great place to grow up.
Nice.
What brought you here?
Candidly, my wife.
Yes, that's usually the answer.
Yeah.
I feel like
Yeah.
One or
That's
the other,
been
generally.
that has been the answer for quite a few of our guests.
Yeah.
How they end up, from afar and near too, like how they end up in the Twin Cities.
Yeah, I was chasing corporate America, and one day said, "Is this really where we want to live?" We were living in Nashville, Tennessee at the time, and at least my version of the story is I told her, "Double your salary and I'll just quit." So she called my bluff, and so here we are.
Try that.
You're like, wait, you did the thing. What's that mean for me now? Really? Oh, okay. So
What you didn't realize is you planted the right seed.
It was the right idea. Absolutely. It's been 30 years and it's been great.
You inspired her. I love it.
Oh, that's great. Where do you live now?
We live in Lakeville.
Lakeville.
And
Nice.
it's not quite Iowa. I tell people we are south of the river, but it's still in Minnesota.
I tell you what, it drops off pretty darn quick when you go south of Lakeville, though.
Yes.
Yes.
Growing more and more, though.
It
now.
it does. I give my
Yeah.
parents crap. They're in Lakeville
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, we make our way down that direction frequently. So
Yeah, every couple weeks.
it's not that far. It really isn't.
How long have you been in the Twin Cities?
We've been back for 30 years. It'll be 30 years in July. So yeah, awesome.
So when you made your way here to the Twin Cities, what was it that you were doing at that time?
At that time, I was working in the automotive aftermarket for Dana Corporation. Many people remember the CarQuest automotive chain. They were my main customer at the end of my time with them.
Mm.
So
I don't know anything about.
Yeah, I was like,
so I'm like.
I was selling car parts for people.
Okay.
Yeah, servicing car dealerships.
Okay.
cool.
I know
Gotcha.
a little bit. My wife works for Sherwin-Williams in automotive. So
Oh,
I didn't realize it was in the automotive side.
Yep.
Interesting.
So
fascinating.
basically, at that time, was a manufacturer's rep.
Cool.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And what do you do now?
Today,
Yeah,
right now, I'm the partner relations individual with Amplify Mission Network.
which is why you're here.
It is
Yes,
why I'm
Wow,
it
isn't that
is.
funny?
Yeah.
So
Didn't tee you up at all there.
I know.
Different than corporate America.
Yeah,
Can you share with our listeners what Amplify Mission Network is?
sure. Amplify Mission Network, our hook line is we are Christian Shark Tank without the money.
Mhm.
So we bring business leaders and community leaders into a room, and they get to hear from two nonprofits that they probably didn't know existed before they walked in the room, who are struggling with problems or issues. And we just ask the people in the room to give their time, their expertise, and then open up their contact list on pairing them up with people that can help them solve those problems.
It's
So,
It's a really impressive organization. I've been part of it since 2020. And Julie Idy, who is the president, um, she was a client of mine, and
Mhm.
I got kind of roped in, like, hey, can you donate money to this thing in 2020, right? Like, I'm like, sure, yeah. And we're like literally COVID time, right?
Mhm.
And it was the coolest online fundraiser that I've ever witnessed. Like even since,
Yeah.
like I haven't. It was great. And so, yeah, I can't say enough good things. And it's interesting, Al, that you say that, like, you bring people that are struggling, or that are kind of at an inflection point.
mhm.
And more times than not, it's like any small business, it's founderitis, it's capacity, it's figuring out, man, this can actually be bigger than what it is currently.
Mhm.
And they just don't have either the know-how, network, or expertise on how to get there. And that room is full of people with that expertise, know-how,
Yeah.
and connections. And it's utterly fascinating how every single meeting you're just like, these guys are going to be okay. These guys are going to figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say you're the exception to the way people are brought into the room,
Mm-hmm.
because you were approached to be a sponsor because of your relationship with Julie and in your business.
Yep.
Where I had a book publishing and distribution business in the Twin Cities for 25 years, and I sold it in 2019. And I was out exploring, what do I want to do next? What's my passion? Where should I go next? And someone said, are you familiar with Amplify Mission Network?
Hmm.
Had never heard of it. So they introduced me to Julie. I won't bore you with that long story, but it was a beautiful, I mean, she said, I don't have time to meet with you, but why don't you come to our meeting? And then if you like what I'm doing, then we'll grab a cup of coffee and we'll talk about it.
Hmm.
And I had no idea what I was getting into that night. And
Mhm.
I didn't know anything about the organization. We hold our meetings at Christ Presbyterian Church in Edina. So I pull up in the parking lot and I'm sitting out there and I'm watching the people. Who's going into this thing? What have I set myself up for? What, are
Yeah.
they dressed like me? Do they look like me? What am I going to do here tonight? What's the purpose? And so I went in, and during the second presentation, which was Jessica with Act United, one of her biggest challenges was she had been approached by a book publishing company and she needed some help. She didn't know anything about book publishing. And I'm like, duh, I just sold my business. I've been doing this, 25 years.
Those nudges.
Yeah. So it was just, that's why I was there that night. And I mean, it just hook, line, and sinker, I was set. So I volunteered at Amplify for the next 3.5 years, just as a partner in the room,
Mhm.
and trying to help out when and where I could. And then last fall, they decided they were going to expand the team. They were a mighty team of 2.5, and they were adding a third person. And they were looking for someone to do partner relations. And I emailed Julie and said, I might be interested, no, let me rephrase that. I said, I might know somebody who's interested, but I want to learn a little bit more about the position. And she simply emailed me back and said, would that somebody be you?
No, it's a friend. I'm asking for a friend.
Exactly. But it was perfect because it's, you just get up every morning. I get to tell the story about what we do and find people to engage and help them plug in and find purpose in their life. And so when we were talking about groups, I mean, isn't that what Rotary is all about?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Finding your purpose, giving back to the community you live and work in. And that's what we're providing more opportunities for people to do.
It's so fascinating being part. The two big organizations I'm part of are incredibly well kept secrets, and it's like, and we don't try to be.
Yeah.
Like Rotary definitely
Yeah.
doesn't try to be, hence the show.
Yeah.
But I mean, same thing with Amplify. It doesn't try to be, but it just is. Like, and I don't get it.
How long has Amplified been in existence?
This is eighth year. And when went to my first in person in 2019, there was maybe, I don't know, I'm going to guess 60, 70 people in the room.
So
We
it
had
was,
150 some at our last meeting.
wow.
Yeah,
So it wasn't
it's
that they invited you because it was somebody who needed, they didn't know that they needed help with the publishing. You just happened to be in the room. I was wondering if they try and coordinate that a little bit with who's going to be there.
As I get to know more of the partners, I'm trying to be a little more intentional. That is,
Mhm.
honestly, part of my role
Yeah.
is to make sure we have the right people in the room. We need to continue to, diversify who's in the room, because just as the nonprofits diversify, we've got to have a bigger, not necessarily larger, but we have a more diverse audience to pull from.
Mhm.
Um,
I mean, just the value of new blood. I mean, just as a reference, I mean, Kelly and I, we run a mastermind of 7, 8, 9 people, and the importance of having somebody new in the room after so long, because it's just you get into rhythm. Like, we're rhythm animals, right? Like,
Yeah.
and we stop seeing all of the angles, and so it's always nice having new people in the room. And that's like part of the format of Amplify is inherently like beneficial to that, right? You have these two organizations that typically have networks of their own, and then they come and support the nonprofit at the meeting, and then a few of them stay and keep coming.
Yeah.
So it just kind of is this self-generating animal that it's been really fun to watch in the last year,
Mhm.
and watch the explosive growth that's starting to happen for Amplify, and
Yeah.
I'm just so happy to see it happening.
Is it all Twin Cities and Minnesota based nonprofits that you're working with, or is it expanded outside of that?
It's all Twin Cities based. We still see the value in being in person.
Yeah.
Did pivot during COVID and did online, but wasn't as robust. Conversations aren't as good when you're on a screen. And candidly, most people now have Zoom fatigue, right?
Yep.
So
Mm.
love the in-person event. The atmosphere in the room and the energy in the room is so much different. I mean, I was at a networking event tonight. You all have been to your Rotary meetings, chamber meetings, but an Amplify meeting just has a different, and you can't explain it. You have to experience it. It has a different feel when you walk in the room. The energy is there, and everybody is there to be helpful and love one another and just do the right things for the right reasons. And you can't do that over a Zoom call.
No, no.
You can't experience that.
It's interesting now. I've actually thought about this.
If-
It's that you have an entire room of people that it's outflow, it's not inflow. And that's palatable when all of a sudden the entire room is outflow of energy and like thought, and it's not about anybody that's in that room trying to go, well, who can I court?
What are they going to
Right.
get out of it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it just goes into those two organizations. And the genius of it is that you have these two organizations that have two very unique different needs, and you keep people thinking about them. I mean, I think part of the genius too is how Amplify prepares each of the presenters coming into the meeting, and making sure that they have a clear and defined ask and a
Yeah.
good story, because we're all compelled by stories. So
Yep.
everybody tells great stories about the organization, about how it started, about some
Impact.
impact,
Mhm.
and it's this outflow. I mean, that's all that I've ever been able to really characterize it as, is outflow. It's just, which is interesting, because like one of the things that I was just thinking about was, man, I need to invite more people to Amplify. But you're so locked in to the organizations when you're there, and you're not even thinking about it like that. And then it's always after the fact, like,
So if you want to be in that room and contribute, is it an invite, or how does that work to contribute in those meetings?
One of our biggest, I'll say, pillars of pride right now is the founders of Amplify wanted to make sure that this was accessible to all. The original model was going to be a dues-paying, membership-driven organization, but they realized we are a Christian faith-based organization. We don't hide that, and if we want to be Christ-like, we need to be free and accessible to all. And so our bi-monthly meetings are now sponsored by generous sponsors. Free meal is provided, and it's just register so we know how many meals to prepare. So we are good stewards of those donor dollars.
Yeah.
And, you can go to our website and register to come. And all we ask is when you show up to that room, you come with an open heart and an open mind to listen, learn, and give back. And it's just been, uh, it's just like you said, Joe, it's just an interesting atmosphere where everybody is there just to help with that intention in mind. So now I'm not saying there aren't people that sometimes feel we plant them. You asked, was I
Yeah.
brought in
Yeah.
specifically because of my book publishing? Quick story about our last meeting. One of the veteran organizations that was there operates Rick's Coffee downtown Minneapolis, and they were running at about a $4,000 a month deficit. And their overarching organization could offset that for the short term, but he really wanted to solve that $4,000 deficit. And he presented that night. Everybody canoodled and provided feedback. And then we have what we call an AMP session afterwards, where we do a 1-hour Zoom call a week after the big presentation and help them sort through and prioritize all of this wonderful information and all these contacts that have been given to them. And probably not surprisingly, 90% of the room was focused on how do we raise that $4,000? How do we raise more money? What do we do? What do we, and that's what the whole conversation was. And I'm not going to say his name out loud because he wouldn't like that. But he turned to me and said, "You set me up." And I said, "I did not set you up." And the individual that was on the call had been a 20-year senior leadership team member with a small company called Caribou Coffee. And he reached out to Tom at every third Saturday and said, "I'd like to take this offline and talk to you about your vendor relations. Are you doing a transactional vendor buy, or do you under contract with them? Who are your vendors?
Yeah.
Maybe we need to look at that. And if you're doing any volume at all, we can take that $4,000 off the expense side and not worry about raising prices and revenue." And it was just a total different way to look at it than everybody else was focused on. And that's the magic that happens.
Fascinating.
It's incredible
I
when
didn't
that
follow
happens.
a word. I mean, the vendor stuff I followed, but then there was a little bit of like getting lost and understanding, but that's okay. Not my
Well, that's why
It's all good.
that's why he was there.
learning.
By chance.
Yeah, that's why there's
Great.
those experts in the room. Everybody has their
Mhm.
little niches. So
Yeah, makes sense.
It's a great story.
Now, how long have you been in this role?
27 days.
well, it depends on how you define it, because as a partner in the room for 3.5 years,
Mhm.
I didn't realize it. But when I was out in the business community, especially after I sold my business and I was networking, I'd meet somebody over coffee one day and say, "Hey, have you ever been to Amplify? You ought to join me next week." So I was bringing people into the room anyway.
Yeah.
catch.
And sorry. But it was October of last year when
Oh,
I
okay.
actually joined the team full
Okay.
time. So
How are the nonprofits selected, or how do they try and become, featured in one of those meetings?
great question. We have an application process. So they fill out the online application, and then Julie who is the president, will interview, set up a meeting, talk to them about it, really drill down where they at in the process. And I'm going to go off directly answering because there's no direct answer,
Yeah.
but some of these organizations are so new and so incubator driven that they may not even have a mission statement. They might not even have their 501c3 classification. So when those opportunities arise, then we reach out to the partners we know, and we may assign the nonprofit what we call a mentor. And that individual then just agrees to spend an hour or two a month with that executive director to help them kind of ramp up, get their ducks in a row, kind of get themselves a little bit established so that they have a little more meat than I'm at ground zero. But if they're a little further along in the journey, one of two things happens. We either assign them a mentor for a shorter period of time, maybe 3 to 6 months, to get them ready to, what I'll say, accept coaching. And then we'll reach out to our partner community and find anywhere from 2 to 4 individuals who agree to be a coach. And they will spend 2 hours a month for about 90 days working with that executive director. They do a 360 review of the organization, and then kind of help them prepare their pitch. Here's our message. Here's what we need to deliver. And we always try to have them ask for tangible solutions, not money.
Mm.
And I get in trouble when I say this, and I'm still going to say it. Every nonprofit thinks the answer to their problems is more money. And if we give them $1 million, that's going to give them a million more problems,
Yep.
and they won't be ready to handle it. So we need to drill down to what are those real issues they're faced with, and then reach out to the larger community, the people in the room, to help solve them. So that's kind of the intro process. But I mean, nonprofits just they hear about it word of mouth. It's sort of like, how do the partners come to the room? Because they're seeing results, they're
Mhm.
hearing it from someone. One of their board members is a partner in our room, and they say, "Hey, you need to get over to Amplify."
Yeah.
Or somebody who's been through the program moves to another nonprofit and then says, "We need to go present at Amplify." So
It's interesting. I love that, Amplify provides solutions for people that aren't ready. I didn't even know that there was the consulting deal until I get an email from Julie going, "Hey, you want to consult a nonprofit?" And I'm like, "Sure." And I, I thought it was just so cool that, it's not, nope, we don't have a place for you. It's, well, wait a second. Maybe we can align you with somebody that can help provide some clarity and directionality for you and help you kind of get out of your own way. I mean, that's the, if there's one thing that I feel like all of them share, every single nonprofit that's up there, is they're all in their own way. Just like all we are, right? Like whenever we want to go somewhere, we're all in our own way. And it's really cool to see Amplify see that and go, okay, how do we continue to support them until they're ready? And then we can transition them into, or not. Like sometimes that's all they needed. And then they're off on their own doing the thing. But it never seems like that Amplify is leaving nonprofits in the lurch. It's always trying to connect them with a resource to help them along.
yeah, I mean,
It's quite wonderful.
we have two nonprofits that present at our 5 meetings a year. So that's only 10 nonprofits. But last year there were 72 or 74 nonprofits that we
Wow.
impacted in some way. And, you know, we have a lot of labels or a lot of titles that we call our partners. And that can sometimes be confusing because we have consultants, we have advisors, we have mentors, we have coaches turn. But the reality is, when you boil it all down, is we're trying to plug people in to a role that they both have the competence and the time to help that nonprofit with, and make sure it's a win-win match for the nonprofit and the partner.
Hmm.
And we have to have some internal labels, right, of advisor, consultant, coach, or whatever. But I don't want the listeners to get caught up in that. It's really just finding out what's your area of expertise, and then how can we help you find a path to put those gifts to work. That's what we're all about.
The other part that's always really interesting too, as the nonprofits get ready to present, is what they come into the room asking for is almost never what they ask for at the presentation. Like so it shows you that prep work helps dig down, because most of the time it's money. It's, you got to fundraise. Maybe they need to hire a position to supplant some of the responsibilities of the founder,
Sure.
but what's really great is that process is why they at least identify why that's important. Like, what are the 3 things that you should be doing 90% of the time, and you're spending 50% of your time on clerical work that you can hire out, and why is that important? So it's really interesting to see the process play out, because it's so important. I mean, it's so useful, like being in that room just for yourself, like as a business owner myself, as a business owner, as somebody that's a business owner as well. And we go, we can learn so much from just what they're doing. So I mean, it's reciprocal. So the whole point of it is it isn't just you diving into them. They help you too.
Yeah, and I think too, extending on that a little bit, sometimes they come in and they do that ask, but the collective power of the room gives them a solution that
They weren't expecting.
they
maybe?
weren't expecting, and in their minds doesn't even relate
Mhm.
to what their concern was. So Young Adults Today presented in January, and it's a fun, they just did an impact video for us. But Josiah and his wife started a ministry, and they came in asking on how do we monetize our podcast.
Mhm.
We have all these listeners, and we can't even get anybody to sponsor it. So that's what they need to understand, how they could use this to fuel their ministry work.
Mm.
No, at the end, when we went through the whole process and during the call, became apparent what they really needed to do was they needed to tighten up their messaging. They needed to forget about this shotgun approach. They needed to put together a true business plan and a message on why it's important for somebody to sponsor, because they really didn't have any of that.
Hmm.
And they presented in January, and he just shared last month, and I'm going to ad lib this a little bit, but they did not get any direct money from anybody that was in that meeting that night. But all of their podcasts from February through the end of the year are now funded. And they had a youth event up in Duluth last weekend, and they had 8 or 9 sponsors that underwrote that program. And he gives all that credit to the collective power of the people in the room that night that just helped him figure out how to do what he knew he needed to do.
Mm.
But he wasn't equipped to do that because, again, he had that owner mentality.
My mind is blown right now.
Well, it's funny too. Like, we've made friends from that meeting. Ironically, I was sitting at the
Yeah.
table with a couple that just met and hit it off with, and they were in supporting them, and we've had dinner with them, and I've had coffee with them a few times. It's hilarious. Like, just all the great things that come
Yeah.
from it.
Well, and I tell people it's a pre-vetted room
Mhm.
of high quality, high moral individuals. So if you're meeting with somebody that's a part of the Amplify family, you've already got a baseline. They're givers.
Yeah.
I love it.
So good.
What would be the best story you could tell on some of the, you kind of shared a couple of them, but the impact you've seen either short or long range for a nonprofit that came through? Just a great example or story that you could share.
Yeah, I think, I pulled my big one out, is the one that just happened in January with Josiah and Young Adults Today. I think even the story that brought me there in 2019 with Jessica with Act United. Again, it's easier one-on-one rather than broadcasting to the world, because I may not get all the details of the story correct, but it'll be good enough. Jessica was an undercover narcotics agent with Hennepin County. And along with the undercover work she was doing, she saw a lot of ick, just a lot of things that none of us could ever imagine. And she had to get out. It was just tearing at her soul, seeing what she saw. Narcotics would end up, with abusive relationships, child trafficking, human trafficking. And so she decided she wanted to start Act United, which is anti-child trafficking. And again, she presented that night with trying to find a sustainable model, dealing with the publishing issue, was operating out of her home. She was the one person act, if you will, doing all of the pitching, all of the programming, outreach to middle schools, because her whole focus is prevention. So fast forward to 2021, she now had 2 staff people. She had a safe space designated for an office downtown Chaska. Her program is being utilized across the country in other programs to help with the awareness piece, because so many people, when we talk about human trafficking, they're focused on recovery and curing or stopping, and she's more in the side of let's prevent it from ever happening in the first place. And so it may not sound all that impactful, but she has gone from this dream and this idea of doing it all herself to 2 or 3 staff, hires interns, has mobilized community members to help with the education component piece. And she just continues to thrive. Another little data point that's fun that I like to share. I had to dig down a little bit to get the true numbers. But there's been roughly 80 nonprofits that have presented in the large group format or over Zoom during those couple of years since Amplify started. 78 of those nonprofits are still in existence, and most, I would say, are flourishing today. And then I'm going to asterisk the two that are no longer present were both founder decisions that their life was going in a different direction, so they shut them down.
Wow.
Mm.
So our success rate for startups is pretty doggone
Yeah,
good.
yeah. In the startup world. That's incredible.
Those are
Truly.
pretty astounding numbers. It's impressive.
You kind of briefly touched on, how do you guys fund your organization to do this work?
So historically, we were founder and board funded, really. And Julie saw that clearly that wouldn't be sustainable and we weren't going to be able to grow if we stayed in that model. And so we added our monthly exclusive sponsorships, where it's really almost a cost recovery. And I don't mind sharing right now, it's $4,200 to sponsor one of our meetings. And that covers meals for 150 to 200 people, renting in the rooms, the materials, and everything that goes along with that. That's only 5 times a year. So you can do the math real quick. Our budget is $560,000 a year. There's 3.5 of us. So again, you can do the math. None of us are making corporate salaries in these roles. But we do once a year a fundraiser. So this year on September 6th, we're having Bob Goff come. He is the author of Love Does, inspirational, motivational speaker, attorney turned kind of speaker, I guess is a good way to put it. And then No in Minneapolis is a youth choir that was one of our presenting groups last year, and they're going to be our featured musical guests that night. And so again, we have very generous underwriters who are sponsors at the various levels, like you would see at a more traditional gala, who come in and underwrite the cost of the program. And then during the evening, we do an ask for the 8 to 1,200 people in the room to say, if you have the ability and it's touching your heart, please reach deep and do what you can to help us fund for another year. And so far, it's worked. It's 8 years.
Yeah.
We're going to try it again. Make number 9.
One of the things I appreciate the most is that that Amplify doesn't leverage the meetings as a ask point. I think that that's important, because then you keep it about the organizations that you're trying to help versus the organization that's putting it on.
Yeah.
I think that that's a very next level meta way of doing that, because it's so pleasant being at that meeting, knowing that you're not getting shaken down for money and all of that. And it's only your time and attention. That's the only thing that seems to be the currency of that meeting. And I think that leads to a lot of that atmosphere too. Because everyone's not like, oh gosh, we're gonna get the shakedown.
Yeah.
Once a year is fine.
Right.
and you literally have an entire awesome event that's dedicated to it. Like it's completely about raising money. And so that you can, wrap your head around. And Kelly, you've been part of those meetings before, and
I have.
they're great events. They're always really great events, because it's just it's
800 1,200 people.
it's
50?
it's a
large event.
amazing celebration. Yeah.
Well, and it's fun too, because, well, like this year, even if you just wanted to come, a Bob Goff VIP ticket, which gets you a little meet and greet ahead of time with him, a smaller, shorter presentation, some heavier hors d'oeuvres, that sort of thing. It's a $75 ticket to come and be a VIP, right? And then the general public can come, and I think those tickets are $40. And so it's even that is approachable. This year it's on a Friday night. So I tell people, get a sitter. It's a good time for a date night. And then the other fun part about it is hint, 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 nudge, 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 right? But the other fun part for those of us that have been in the room, some of the ministries that have presented, we offer them an opportunity to come that night and have a table. So like Hope Farm Schools will be there, and they'll be selling bundles of meat and meat sticks to be delivered later. There's,
I'm in on that one.
Wildfire Coffee.
They've been there. They were there last year too, weren't they?
And some of them have such a great time being there and telling their story, and then they get some sales out of it, which fuels theirs. And we don't charge them to be there. It's all about partnering.
Yeah.
My title is partner relations, and we need to be this mentality of nonprofits are competing for each other's dollars is ludicrous. I mean, we need to be partnering to strengthen each other, to move
Yeah.
us all forward and lift us all up, and not
It's a-
look at each other as competitors.
It's a great
So-
mindset to have too, Al. I mean, I'm glad that you have taken that approach instead of succumbing to, we are competing with all these other nonprofits. Instead, you're like, let's embrace this. Like, there's a way to support no matter what. It's great.
Well, it's interesting. You've been in your role for less than a year, and then
Kind of.
kind of, yeah.
I was in 3.5 years of training to be ready for the role.
So, with Julie retiring, and it seems like, and for everybody that knows Julie that's listening, she does a lot, and
She wears many hats.
she wears a lot of hats. And where do you see that as an opportunity for you to step in and fill some of that? Like, because I think where the leadership has identified and recognized, like, that should not be on the shoulders of one person.
Yeah.
Right. It's not sustainable when you go back to and so to see Amplify starting to break up that role a little bit into some of the parts, because it's growing so much, is how do you see this partner relations and engagement director role kind of grow, like that you can take it and grow it?
It's already happening.
Already happened. Well, you're on this podcast,
I'm
right?
on this podcast
Yeah.
right now. I'm going to be speaking at the Mound Rotary and the Morningside Rotary Group. So those are things.
Morningside, yeah.
So those are two things that normally maybe would have fallen on Julie's shoulders.
Mhm.
But I think too. Well, first of all, thank you for recognizing that. The joy of me, by the time Julie retires, I'll have been in this role for almost 1.5 years.
Mhm.
And so the new person coming in isn't going to have to be under pressure to get to
Right.
know the 150 to 200 people in the room. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, because I've been able to step into that role now and start to develop those relationships and understand who individuals are. Again, really focused on who are the new people that are coming in as well, and where do they want to be plugged in. So those roles of identifying coaches, consultants. I mean, just this morning, Julie emailed me and said, here's a nonprofit that we need to find a consultant for, someone to work alongside them to solve this specific problem. Anybody come to mind? And then I shoot her off 2 or 3 names with a little bio and their email and say, reach out to them. And that's the other thing, is we always approach it first from the partner level.
Mm-hmm.
We send out the opportunity to our business and community leaders in the room and say, is this something you're interested in, something you're comfortable with?
Mhm.
And you have the bandwidth at this chapter in your life. Last week, everybody was getting transitioned from schools out to summer schedules for their kids. We couldn't ask anybody for anything last week.
Yeah.
Everybody we asked said, no, I don't have time. But we
Yeah.
asked them this week, and now they're starting to say yes. Right?
Funny.
They're like, we're in the routine now, we think. I think we got
Right.
it.
So
So
I think taking on some of those roles is going to be a big thing. And believe me, we're having continual conversations as a team about how do we divvy this up to make sure that it's a smooth transition. Because you're right. I mean, when it started in 2008, Julie was a one-person band. She was wearing every hat.
Yeah.
And now there's 2.5 of us that she can push off what she
Carefully-
doesn't want to do.
carefully, yeah.
Right? That's the
Slide
joy of
that paperwork over to you.
Right,
Like, hey,
exactly.
You need to help with this.
Well, that's a big area of growth for her. Good job, Julie. I got to give you a lot of props.
She's gonna listen to this and laugh.
Because I'm like,
She's giggling.
yeah, Julie likes to do everything.
What, as you obviously you talked about the retirement, where do you see the growth and the evolution of the organization? Obviously, we're talking the transition now, but even 5 years and 10 years down the road.
Yeah, I mean, well, we've got a couple of different things, and that's again a continual thing that at least in the 6 months that I've been on board, we continue to talk about. Do you go wider or you go deeper?
Yeah.
And I'll go back to 2019 when I first was involved. These nonprofits would go through the coaching session. They do their presentation. We do a 1-hour AMP session. We'd give them a 20-page document with all of this information that these smart 100+ people gave. Good luck. See ya.
Bye.
That's where it ended. Well, if they're already drinking out of the fire hose and you give them 50 people they need to call the next week to capture their excitement, they don't even know how to manage that.
Yeah.
And as Joe said earlier, a lot of them can't get out of their own way.
Yeah.
And so now we ask one of the coaches to become a mentor and make a 6-month commitment to walk alongside them. So that's one way we're growing in this consultant area, again, that we talked about a little bit earlier, where they're coming to us with a specific problem that we can just find a resource for and match it up. I think we've done 30 of those since the beginning of the year already. Because we're getting to know people and we're getting more comfortable in that space. So just be a connector. And I think too, there's a comfort level that if they've come through the Amplify process or Amplify knows who they are, our partners are more comfortable and willing to say yes to that organization because there's a certain sense of legitimacy to them. And then the other exciting thing that, again, I'm looking at Joe, you may not even know, but in April, we launched a new program called Reamp. So bear with me. Yeah, think about it. Those nonprofits that presented in 2008 and 2009 came with a set of problems. And one in particular, they were a $350,000 a year organization, and now they're about a $5 million a year organization. They got a new set of problems.
Yes,
Yes,
new
they
problems.
do. It's called,
New
they've
problems.
leveled up.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
now they got to figure out that next level.
Yeah. So we've relaunched, and we initially reached out again to those 70 or so that had come through. We purposely didn't do the last couple of years because they're still working through their current issues. And I think there's 10 or 12 that have reached out and said, here's a specific issue we need help with. And again, we don't have to put them through a 9-month journey to solve that problem. We just need to find the resources to plug them in. So that's a couple of ways. And then the other thing I'll plug this is, how do we take this on the road?
Oh.
Instead of us bringing 150 people together on a Tuesday evening to do it, could we go
Ooh.
to Edina Morning Rotary one morning and bring in a nonprofit leader and in an hour's time do a mini version of the AMP session?
So the
And-
model. So you're looking to carry the model through. That's fascinating. That was
You're
actually
talking to the right person over
that-
here who will literally leave here and be noodling on it.
Well, we've got 2 oars in the water. We're dabbling with a couple of groups right now to see, and we'll beta test it kind of quietly. And maybe I'm not supposed to be talking publicly about it, but hey, slap my hand. We're going to need ideas. And, one of my ideas, sorry, I'm cutting you off, Joe, but,
No, it's okay.
I canoodled this with some folks at Cargill.
Yeah.
And, they've got a prayer at work group at Cargill. So they're not afraid of saying we have Christian believers in the room.
Yeah.
So let's find a food insecurity dealing nonprofit that needs some help and let them go and present at Cargill and let Cargill own and solve that problem.
How
How
is
cool would that be, And then they can see the impact on a local level.
Yeah.
As opposed to just throwing money at a cause. You actually have some skin in the game.
Well, and then also, so 2 things really quick. One, you're coming alongside of those business organizations that are looking for, philanthropic organizations to support. Now that one, it's almost like they're a self-driver of helping, right? Like you give them the model to empower themselves to do it, right? And then second, it was one of the things that I was going to ask is there any concern of outgrowing the room? You know what I mean? Like, has Amplify had any conversations of going, is there actually an upper limit to the number of people that we can have in a room where the energy and everything starts to break down? Is there a max? Have we encountered that? What do we do if we do encounter that? Is that 150 mark going to be that real sweet spot? And all of a sudden you go to 200 and it's a little bit different.
Yeah.
Those are really interesting growing pains. It's so funny. Amplify is literally going through their own program right now.
We are. You're right. And we talk about it. And should we do a presentation with our new leaders sometime and say, we need help from the collective power of this room. It might be the perfect time because here's where we need to go. But to answer your question, yes, we've talked about some other alternatives. And again, I mentioned, we meet at Christ Presbyterian Church because they have a beautiful space, a beautiful facility. And honestly, regardless of what your faith is, when you walk into a place of worship, it puts you in a different spot.
Mhm.
If we took Amplify and did it at a brewery, it would have a totally different vibe.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying it wouldn't be fun.
Right.
Might be fun to try that and see what happens. But I think when people step into a place of worship, it has a different feel. If we took it and moved it to a hotel ballroom, it would have a different feel and atmosphere to the room, even though we don't
Agreed.
do any.
An
Yeah.
interesting conundrum for your next level model of making it travel is
Mhm.
if there is a component of that's real. You know what I mean? And if it's something that we just kind of feel because that's the way it always has been, or does it play the same way in a Rotary meeting? Does it? And it's actually the messaging and the system that carries all of that and
Mm.
inspires all of that. It'll be really interesting to test that.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. I'm
What
excited
what
about
a
it.
place to end this. That was perfect.
Yeah, I feel like we could sit here for hours talking
Always flies
about
by.
it. I know. Well, how can people find Amplify? Where should they go? And then how can they support?
So amplifymission.org
Okay.
is our website. Certainly reach out to us through that. Registration is free for any of our events with the exception of the one fundraising event. So what they can do if they're interested is come on September 6th to our fundraising event
Mhm.
and then look for our next big meeting will be in November.
Okay.
Certainly would invite anybody who has an interest in supporting us to reach out. We're looking for sponsorships as well, but also those partners in the room to come and
Mhm.
engage. And also, I know some of your members are serving on nonprofit boards. So one thing real quickly, we have a learning academy, which is an opportunity for continuing education for executive director leadership that we didn't even talk about today. So if you have board members that are on a board for a nonprofit, let's talk about that opportunity with them individually.
Huh. I didn't even know that.
I'll put the link for the organization in the description, as well as a link for the fundraiser.
Perfect.
So if you're listening, you can check out those in the description of the show.
Al, thanks so much.
Oh, this has been awesome.
It was
Been
great to
fun.
meet you.
Thank you.
It's been a
Thanks
great
for
afternoon.
coming on and sharing more on Amplify and its mission. I'm your host, Kelly Kirk.
I'm Joe Kirk.
And I'm Chad Larson. We'll be back.
Hello and welcome back to Searching for Service. I'm your host, Kelly Kirk.
And I'm Joe Kirk.
And I'm Chad Larson.
Ooh, I enjoy Al so much.
Yeah.
What a cool cat.
It was cool to learn about all the work and kind of the unique approach to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's got and his network too. I mean, just what he's doing and what he's about and what Amplify Mission is about as well it's a nice little partnership.
It amps me up.
Oh, you had to, didn't you? You had to. Well, I hope that you all enjoyed this episode with Al Krysan. I'm your host, Kelly Kirk.
I'm Joe Kirk.
And I'm Chad Larson.
It's time to stop searching
And start serving.
We'll see you next week.